that he has done so. But most of all, when you blame a man as faithless or ungrateful, turn to yourself, for the fault is manifestly your own, if you trusted a man with such a disposition to keep his promise, or if, when conferring your kindness, you did not do it on principle, or in such a way as to have received from your very act all the profit. For what more do you want when you have done a man a service? Are you not content when you have done something in harmony with your nature, and do you seek to be paid for it? Does the eye demand a reward for seeing, or the feet for walking? For as these members are formed for a particular purpose, and by working according to the law of their being obtain what is their own, so also as man is formed by nature for acts of benevolence, when he has done anything benevolent, or in any way conducive to the common interest, he has acted in harmony with his constitution, and he gets what is his own. 10. Will you then, my soul, never be good and simple, all one and naked, clearer to sight than the body which encompasses you? Will you never enjoy an affectionate and contented disposition? Will you never be full and without a want of any kind, longing for nothing more, either animate or inanimate, for the enjoyment of pleasures, nor yet desiring time wherein you shall have longer enjoyment, or place, or pleasant climate, or society of men with whom you may live in harmony? But will you be satisfied with your present condition, and pleased with all about you, and will you convince yourself that you have everything and that it comes from the gods, that everything is well for you, and will be well whatever shall please them, and whatever they shall give you for the perfect living being, the good and just and beautiful, which generates and holds together all things, and contains and embraces all things which are dissolved for the production of other like things? Will you never be such that you shall so dwell in community with gods and men as neither to find fault with them at all, nor to be condemned by them? Observe what your nature requires so far as you are governed by nature only. Then do it, and accept it, if your nature shall not be made worse for it. And next you must observe what your nature requires as far as you are a living being, and this you may do, unless it involves injury to your nature as a rational being. But the rational being is consequently also a social being. Follow these rules, then, and trouble yourself about nothing else. Everything which happens either happens in such a way that you are formed by nature to bear it, or not to bear it. If what happens to you is within your strength to bear it without complaining. If it is beyond your strength, do not complain, for it will perish after it has destroyed you. Remember, however, that you are formed by nature to bear everything which your own opinion can make endurable and tolerable, by thinking that it is either your interest or your duty to do so. If a man is mistaken, instruct him kindly, and show him his error. If you are not able to do this, blame yourself, or blame not even yourself. Whatever may happen to you, it was prepared for you from all eternity, and the implication of causes was from eternity spinning the thread of your being, and of that which is incident to it. Whether the universe is a concourse of atoms or nature's law, let this be first established, that I am a part of the whole which is governed by nature. Next, I am intimately related to the parts which are of the same kind with myself. For remembering this, inasmuch as I am a part, I shall be discontented with none of the things which are assigned to me out of the whole. For nothing is injurious to the part, if it is for the advantage of the whole. For the whole contains nothing which is not for its own good, and all natures indeed have this common principle, but the nature of the universe has this principle besides, that it cannot be compelled even by any external cause to generate anything harmful to itself. By remembering, then, that I am a part of such a whole, I shall be content with everything which happens, and inasmuch as I am in a manner intimately related to the parts which are of the same kind with myself, I shall do nothing unsocial, but I shall rather direct myself to the things which are of the same kind with myself, and I shall turn all my efforts to the common interest, and avert them from the contrary. Now, if these things are done so, life must flow on happily, just as you may observe that the life of a citizen is happy if he continues a course of action which is advantageous to his fellow citizens, and is content with whatever the state may assign to him. The parts of the whole which are comprehended in the universe must of necessity perish, that is, they must undergo change. But if this is both an evil and a necessity to the parts, the whole could not escape deterioration, seeing the parts are subject to change and prone to perish in various ways. Did nature herself design to do evil to the things which are parts of herself, and to make them subject to evil, and of necessity fall into evil, or have such things happened without her knowing it? Both these suppositions are indeed incredible. But if a man should even drop the term nature as an efficient power, and should speak of these changes as natural, even then it would be ridiculous to affirm at the same time that the parts of the whole are naturally subject to change, and at the same time to be surprised or vexed, as if something were happening contrary to nature, particularly such as the dissolution of things into the original elements. For there is either a dispersion of the elements out of which everything has been compounded, or a change from the solid to the earthy, and from the spiritual to the aerial, so that these parts are taken back into the universal reason, whether this at certain periods is consumed by fire, or renewed by eternal changes. And do not imagine that the solid and the spiritual part belong to you from the time of your begetting, for it received its increase only yesterday and the day before, so to speak, from the food you eat and the air you breathe. This, then, that has received changes from without is not that which your mother brought forth. But even admitting that you are intimately bound up with that by your individuality, this does not affect the argument. When you have assumed these attributes, good, modest, true, rational, equable, magnanimous, take care that you do not change them, and if you should lose them, quickly return to them. And remember that the term rational was intended to signify a discriminating attention to every separate thing, and freedom from negligence, and that equanimity is the voluntary acceptance of the things which are assigned to you by the common nature, and that magnanimity is the elevation of the intelligent part above the pleasurable or painful sensations of the flesh, and above fame and death and all such trials. If, then, you keep true to these attributes, without desiring that others should recognize that you have them, you will be another person, and will enter on another life. For to continue to be such as you had hitherto been, and to be torn in pieces and defiled in such a life, is the character of a very stupid man, one over-fond of his life, and like those half-devoured fighters with wild beasts, who, though covered with wounds and gore, still entreat to be kept to the following day, to be flung once more to the same claws and bites. Therefore fix yourself firmly in the possession of these few attributes, and if you are able to stand fast as if you were transported to the Happy Isles. But if you find yourself falling and cannot maintain your hold, go courageously into some nook where you can still hold on, or even depart at once from life, not in passion, but with simplicity and freedom and modesty, after doing this one thing, at least bravely, to leave it thus. In order, however, to aid the remembrance of these attributes, it will greatly help you if you remember the gods, and that they do not wish to be flattered, but wish all reasonable beings to be made like themselves, and be as the fig tree doing the work of a fig tree, the dog a dog's, the bee a bee's, and man a man's work. A stage play, war, terror, torpor, slavery, all these will daily help to wipe out your sacred principles. How many things, without studying nature, do you overlook, and how many do you neglect? But it is your duty to look on and to do everything that at the same time the power of dealing with circumstances is perfected, and the contemplative faculty is exercised, and the confidence which comes from the knowledge of each separate thing is maintained without being apparent nor yet concealed. Ah, when will you enjoy simplicity, gravity, and when the knowledge of every separate thing, both what it is in substance and what place it has in the universe, and how long it is formed to exist, and of what things it is compounded, and to whom it can belong, and who are able both to give it and take it away. A spider is proud when it has caught a fly. So is a man when he has caught a hare, another when he has taken a fish in a net, another when he has killed wild boars or bears, another when he has captured Sarmatians. Are they not all brigands, if you look into their principles? Acquire the contemplative way of seeing how all things change into one another, and constantly attend to it, and exercise yourself about this part of philosophy. Nothing is so apt to produce magnanimity. Such a man has put off the body, and as he sees that at any moment he must go away from among men and leave everything here, he gives himself entirely up to just actions, and in everything else that happens he resigns himself to the universal nature. But as to what any man shall say or think about him or do against him, he never even thinks of it, being himself contented with these two things, with acting justly in what he now does, and being satisfied with what is now assigned to him. And he lays aside all distracting and busy pursuits, and desires nothing else than to run the straight course, and by so doing follow God. What need is there of suspicious fear, since it is in your power to inquire what ought to be done? And if all is clear, go forward content, without turning back. But if all is not clear, stop and take the best of counsel. But if any other things oppose you, go on according to your powers with due consideration, keeping to that which appears just. For it is best to aim at this, and if you fail, let your failure be in making this attempt. He who follows reason in all things is both tranquil and active at the same time, and also cheerful and collected. Inquire of yourself as soon as you awaken from sleep, whether it will make any difference to you if another does what is just and right. It will make no difference. Have you forgotten that those who assume arrogant airs in bestowing their praise or blame on others are the same in bed and at table? Have you forgotten what it is they pursue and avoid, how they steal, not with hands and feet, but with their most valuable part, by means of which, if a man chooses, he arrives at fidelity, modesty, truth, law? To nature who gives and takes back all, the man who is instructed and modest says, "Give what thou wilt, take back what thou wilt." And he says this not proudly, but obediently, and with good will. Little of life remains to you. Live as on a mountain, for it makes no difference whether a man lives there or here, if he lives everywhere as a citizen of the world. Let men see, let them know a real man who lives according to nature. If they cannot endure him, let them kill him, for that is better than to live as they do. No longer talk about the kind of man a good man ought to be, but be one. Constantly contemplate the whole of time and the whole of substance, and consider that all things as to substance are a seed of a fig, and as to time the turning of a screw. Look at everything that exists, and observe that it is already in dissolution and in change, by putrefaction and dispersion, or by its own way of death. Consider what men are like, eating, sleeping, breeding, easing themselves, and so forth. Look at their wantonness, their arrogance and rages. But a short time ago, how many of them bowed the knee? And for what ends? And after a little time, consider in what condition they will be. What the universal nature brings to each thing, and when it brings it, is for its good. The earth loves the shower, and the solemn ether loves. And the universe loves to make whatever is about to be. I say then to the universe that I love as thou lovest. And is it not also said, this or that loves to be produced? Either you live here and have already accustomed yourself to it, or you are going away, and this was your own wish. Or you are dying and have discharged your duty. Besides these things there is nothing. Be of good cheer, then. Let this always be plain to you, that this piece of land is like any other, and that what is here is the same as what is on top of a mountain, or on the seashore, or wherever you choose. As Plato says of his philosopher, whose retreat is like a shepherd's fold on a mountain. What of my ruling faculty at this minute, and what am I making of it? For what purpose am I using it? Is it void of understanding? Is it loosed and rent asunder from social life? Is it melted into and mixed with the poor flesh so as to move together with it? The slave who flies from his master is a runaway. The law is master, and he who breaks the law is a runaway. Vexation, anger, and fear mean refusal of something past, present, or to come, ordained by him who rules all things, law, who allots to every man what is fit. He then who fears or is grieved or is angry is a runaway. A man deposits a seed in a womb and goes away, and another cause takes up the work and makes a child. What a flower from what a seed! Again the child swallows food, and then another cause takes it and makes perception and motion, and, in short, life and strength and other things. How many and how strange! Observe, then, the things which are produced in such a hidden way, and see the power behind them, just as we perceive the power that carries things downwards and upwards, not with the eyes, but still no less plainly. Consider that the things of the present also existed in times past, and consider that they will be the same again, and place before your eyes, from your own experience or from the pages of history, these dramas and scenes, the courts of Hadrian, Antoninus, Philip, Alexander, Croesus, all the same plays, only with different actors. Imagine every man who is grieved at anything or discontented to be like a sacrificial pig, which kicks and squeals. Like this pig also is he who on his bed in silence laments the bonds in which we are held. And remember that it is given only to the rational animal to go along freely with all that comes. Merely to submit is a necessity imposed on all. Point by point, whenever we do anything, let us pause and ask ourselves if death is a dreadful thing because it deprives us of this. When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. For example, in thinking that money or reputation or pleasure are good things. By attending to this, you will quickly forget your anger, if this consideration is also added, that the man is compelled to act as he does. If you can, take away from him the compulsion. When you see Satyron, Eutyches, or Hymen, think of some follower of Socrates, and let the sight of Euphrates remind you of Eutychion or Sylvanus, Alciphron of Tropiophorus, Xenophon of Crito or Severus. A look at yourself, of some Caesar of the past, and in every other case reflect, where are they all now? Nowhere, or nobody knows where. In this way you will come to look at human beings as smoke and nothingness, especially if you reflect at the same time that what has once changed will never again exist through all eternity. What a brief span is the period of your life! Why are you not content to pass it in an orderly way? What matter and opportunity for your activity are you avoiding? For what are such things but exercises for the reason, viewing the happenings of life in their true nature? Persevere until you have made these things your own, just as the healthy stomach assimilates its food, or a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. Let it not be in any man's power to say truly of you that you are not simple and good. Let it be a lie if anyone shall think anything of this kind about you. This is wholly in your power. For who shall hinder you from being good and simple? You have only to decide to live no longer if you cannot be such a man. For in that case it does not stand with reason that you should live. With this material, what can be done or said in the way most conformable to reason? For whatever this may be, it is in your power to do or say it, and do not make excuses that you are hindered. You will never cease lamenting until your mind is in such a condition that you will make use of all materials and every opportunity to fulfill the law of your being, enjoying this as luxury lovers enjoy pleasure. For a man ought to consider as an enjoyment everything which it is in his power to do according to his own nature, and the opening is always there. Now, it is not given to a cylinder to move everywhere by its own motion, nor yet to water, nor to fire, nor to anything else which is governed by nature, or an irrational soul, for the things which check them are many. But intelligence and reason are able to go through everything that opposes them, and in such manner as they are formed by nature, and as they choose. Recall the facility with which the reason will find a way, as a stone drops or a cylinder rolls down an inclined plane, and look no further, for all these obstacles either affect the body only, which is a dead thing, or except through opinion and the yielding of the reason itself, they do not crush or do any kind of harm. For if they did, he who felt it would immediately be injured. Now, in the case of things of a certain constitution, whatever harms any of them, that which is so affected becomes consequently worse. But in this case, the man becomes both better, if one may say so, and more worthy of praise by making right use of these accidents. And finally, remember that nothing harms the citizens which does not harm the state, nor does anything harm the state which does not harm law. But so-called misfortunes do not harm law. What then does not harm law harms neither state nor citizen. To him who is imbued with true principles, even the briefest and commonest precept is sufficient to remind him that he should be free from grief and fear. For example, leaves, some the wind scatters on the ground, so is the race of men. Leaves also are your children, and leaves too are they who cry out their praises or curses, or secretly blame or sneer. And leaves too are those who shall receive and transmit a man's fame to the future. For all such things as these are produced in the season of spring, as the poet says. Then the wind casts them down, then the frost produces other leaves in their places. But a brief existence is common to all things, and yet you pursue and avoid things as if they would be eternal. A little time, and your eyes will close, and he who attends you to your grave another will soon lament. The healthy eye ought to see all visible things, and not to say, I wish for green things, for this is the condition of a diseased eye. And the healthy hearing and smelling should be ready to perceive all that can be heard and smelled. And the healthy stomach ought to receive food, as the mill received that which it was made to grind. And accordingly the healthy understanding ought to be prepared for everything which happens. But that which says, Let my dear children live, and let all men praise whatever I may do, is an eye which seeks for green things, or teeth which seek for soft things. There is no man so fortunate that there shall not be by him, when he is dying, some who are pleased with what is going to happen. Suppose that he was a good and wise man, will there not be at the last some to say of him, Let us at last breathe freely, being relieved from this schoolmaster? It is true that he was harsh to none of us, but I perceived that he tacitly condemns us. This is what is said of a good man. But in our own case, how many other things are there for which there are many who wish to get rid of us? You will consider this, then, when you are dying, and you will depart more contentedly by reflecting thus, I am going away from such a life in which even my associates, in behalf of whom I have striven so much, prayed and cared, themselves wish me to depart, hoping perchance to get some little advantage by it. Why then should a man cling to a longer stay here? Do not, however, for this reason go away less kindly disposed to them, but preserving your own character, and continuing friendly and benevolent and kind, and, on the other hand, not as if you were torn away, but as when a man dies a quiet death, the soul is easily separated from the body, such also ought your departure from men to be. Nature united the elements of which she compounded you, and now she dissolves the union. Well, I am but separated from kinsmen, unresisting and unrebellious, for this too is according to nature. Whatever is being done, accustom yourself as much as possible to inquire, why is this man doing this thing? But begin with yourself, and examine yourself first. Remember that what pulls the strings is hidden within, This is the power of persuasion. This is life. This, if one may say so, is man. In contemplating yourself, never include the vessel which surrounds you, and these organs attached to it. They are like tools, differing in this only, that they grow to the body. For indeed, there is no more use in these parts without the cause that moves and checks them than in the weaver's shuttle, or the writer's pen, or the driver's whip. 11. These are the properties of the rational soul. It sees itself, analyzes itself, and makes itself what it wills, bears and enjoys its own fruit, while in the vegetable or animal world the fruit is enjoyed by others. It obtains its own wherever the limit of life may be fixed. In a dance or in a play, an interruption leaves the action incomplete. Not so with the soul. At every point, and wherever it may be stopped, its task is full and complete, so that it can say, I have what is my own. And further, it traverses the whole universe and the surrounding vacuum, and surveys its form, and extends itself into the infinity of time, and embraces and comprehends the periodical regeneration of all things. And it comprehends that those who come after us will see nothing new, nor have those before us seen anything more. But he who is 40 years old, if he has any understanding at all, has seen everything by virtue of the uniformity of things past and to come. This, too, is a property of the rational soul, love of one's neighbor, and truth and modesty, and to value nothing more than itself, which is also the property of law. Thus right reason differs not at all from the reason of justice. You will set little value on the delights of song and dance, and the pancratium, if you will break up the melody into its several sounds, and ask yourself as to each if this is what enchanted you. For you will be prevented by shame from confessing it. And in the manner of dancing, if at each movement and attitude you will do the same, and similarly with the pancratium. In all things, then, except virtue and virtuous acts, remember to apply yourself to their several parts, and by this division to come to value them little. Apply this rule to your whole life. Oh, for a soul that is ready at any moment to be separated from the body, either to be extinguished, or dispersed, or continue to exist. This readiness must come from a man's own judgment, not from mere obstinacy, as with the Christians, and considerately and with dignity, in a way that will persuade others without tragic show. Have I done something for the general interest? Well, I have had my reward. Let this be always present to your mind, and never grow weary. What is your art? To be good. And how is this achieved except by understanding general principles, some about the nature of the universe, and others about man's own constitution? Tragedies, the first form of drama, were brought on the stage as a means of reminding men of the things which happen to them, and that it is according to nature for things to happen so, and that if you are delighted with what is shown on the stage, you should not be troubled with what takes place on the larger stage. For you see that the play must end in such a way, and that even in such cries as, O Citharon, there is strength to bear, and the dramatists give us words of help, such as the following: Me and my children, if the gods neglect, this has its reason too. And again, we must not chafe at that which happens. And life's harvest reap like the wheat's fruitful ear, and other things of the same kind. After tragedy, the old comedy was introduced. This had a magisterial freedom of speech, and by its very plainness of speaking was useful in reminding men to beware of insolence, somewhat in the style used by Diogenes. But as to the middle comedy, which came next, note what it was, and for what object the new comedy was introduced, which gradually sank down into a mere mimic artifice. That some good things are said even by these writers everyone knows. But what is the main purpose of this school of drama? To what end does it look? It seems plain that there is not another condition of life so well suited for philosophy as this in which you now find yourself. A branch cut off from the adjacent branch must of necessity be cut off from the whole tree also. So, too, a man, when he is separated from another man, has fallen off from the whole social community. Now, as to a branch, another cuts it off, but a man, by his own act, separates himself from his neighbor when he hates him and turns away from him, and he does not know that he has, at the same time, cut himself off from the whole social system. Yet he has this privilege, certainly, from Zeus, who framed society, for it is in our power to grow again to that which is near to us, and again to become a part which helps to make up the whole. However, if this kind of separation happens often, it makes it difficult for that which detaches itself to be brought to unity and to be restored to its former condition. Finally, the branch which from the first grew together with the tree, and has continued to have one life with it, is not like that which, after being cut off, is then ingrafted, but it is something like what the gardeners mean when they say that it grows with the rest of the tree, but has not the same mind with it. As those who try to stand in your way when you are proceeding according to right reason will not be able to turn you aside from your proper action, so neither let them drive you from your benevolent feelings towards them, but be on your guard equally in both matters, not only in the matter of steady judgment and action, but also in the matter of gentleness towards those who try to hinder or otherwise trouble you. For it is a weakness to be vexed at them, as it is to be diverted from your course of action, and to give way through fear. For both are equally deserters from their post, the man who acts through fear, and the man who is alienated from his natural brother and friend. Nature is never inferior to art, for the arts imitate nature. If so, nature in its most perfect and comprehensive form cannot fall short of art. Now, all arts do the inferior things for the sake of the superior. Therefore, the universal nature does so too. And indeed here is the origin of justice, and in justice all other virtues have their foundation, for justice will not be observed if we either care for secondary things, or are easily deceived, or careless, or changeable. The things which either to get or to avoid you go to so much trouble, come not to you, but you, rather, go to them. Let then your judgment about them be at rest, and they will remain quiet too, and you will not be seen either pursuing or avoiding. The spherical form of the soul maintains its figure, when it is neither extended towards any object, nor contracted inwards, nor dispersed, nor sinks down, but is illuminated by light, by which it sees the truth of all things, and that which is in itself. Does any man despise me? Let him see to that. But I shall see to this, that I be not discovered doing or saying anything worthy of contempt. Shall any man hate me? That is his affair. But I will be mild and benevolent towards everyone, ready to show his mistake to this very man, not reproachfully, nor yet as making a display of my forbearance, but nobly and honestly, like the great Phocion, unless indeed he only assumed it. That is the proper inner state, and a man should not be seen by the gods to be either dissatisfied or complaining. For what evil is it to you, if you are now doing what is agreeable to your own nature, and are satisfied with that which at the moment is suitable to nature, since you are a human being placed at your post to endure whatever is for the common advantage? Men despise one another, and flatter one another, and men wish to raise themselves above one another, and crouch before one another. How unsound and insincere he is who says, "I have determined to deal with you in a fair way." What? Do you have to give notice of fairness? It will show soon enough in action. Truth will be plainly written on your forehead. A man's character shows itself in his voice and eyes, just as lovers may read everything in each other's eyes. The man who is honest and good ought to be like a man who has a strong odor. Anyone who comes near must smell whether he choose or not. But the affectation of simplicity is like a crooked stick. Nothing is more disgraceful than a wolfish friendship. Avoid this most of all. The good and simple and benevolent show all these things in the eyes, and there is no mistaking. As to the perfecting of life, this power is in the soul, and it grows by being indifferent towards things which are indifferent. And it will be indifferent if it looks on each of these things separately and altogether, and if it remembers that not one of them produces in us an opinion about itself, nor comes to us, but these things remain immovable, and it is we ourselves who produce the judgments about them, and, as we may say, write them on our minds, it being in our power not to write them, and it being in our power, if perchance these judgments have gained admission imperceptibly, to wipe them out. And the need for such discipline will be necessary only for a short time, and then life will be at an end. Why make a grievance out of doing this? For if these things are according to nature, rejoice in them, and they will be easy for you. But if contrary to nature, seek what is in harmony with your own nature, and strive towards this, even if it bring no reputation. For every man is allowed to seek his own good. Consider whence each thing comes, of what it consists, and into what it changes, what it will be like when changed, and that it will sustain no harm. Consider these things. First, what is my relation to men? We are made for one another, or, in another view, I was made to be set over them as a ram over a flock, or a bull over a herd. But examine the question from first principles. If all things are not mere atoms, it is nature which orders all things. If this is so, the inferior things exist for the sake of the superior, and these for the sake of one another. Second, consider how men are at table, in bed, and so forth, and particularly under what compulsions they are with respect to opinions, and as to their acts, consider with what pride they do what they do. Third, that if men do rightly what they do, we ought not to be displeased. But if they do not right, it is plain that they do so involuntarily and in ignorance. For as every soul is unwillingly deprived of the truth, so also it is unwillingly deprived of the power of behaving to each man according to his deserts. Accordingly, men are pained when they are called unjust, ungrateful, and greedy, or charged with behaving wrongfully to their neighbors. Fourth, Consider that you also do many things wrong, that you are a man like others, and even if you abstain from certain faults, you still have the disposition to commit them, though either through cowardice or concern for reputation, or some such mean motive, you refrain from wrongdoing. Fifth, consider that you do not even know whether men are doing wrong or not, for many things are done with a certain reference to circumstances. In short, a man must learn a great deal to enable him to pass a correct judgment on another man's acts. Sixth, consider when you are vexed or grieved that man's life is only a moment, and after a short time we all lie stretched in death. Seventh, that it is not men's acts which disturb us, for those acts have their foundation in men's ruling principles, but it is our own opinions regarding them. Take away these opinions, then, and resolve to dismiss your judgment about an act as if it were something grievous, and your anger is gone. How, then, shall you take away these opinions? By reflecting that no wrongful act of another brings shame on you. For since that which is shameful is alone bad, you must of necessity do all sorts of evil, become a robber, and everything else. Eighth, consider how much more pain is brought on us by the anger and vexation caused by such acts than by the acts themselves, at which we are angry and vexed. Ninth, consider that benevolence is invincible if it be genuine, and not merely an affected smile and playing a part. For what will the most violent man do to you if you continue to be of a benevolent disposition towards him, and, as opportunity offers, gently admonish him and calmly correct his errors, at the very time he is trying to do you harm, saying, "Not so, my child. We are constituted by nature for something else. I shall certainly not be injured, but you are injuring yourself, my child," and show him with gentle tact and by general principles that this is so, and that even bees do not, as he does, nor any animals which are formed by nature to be gregarious. And do this neither with any double meaning, nor in the way of reproach, but affectionately, and without rancor in your soul, and not as if you were lecturing him, or to show off before others, but quietly in his own ear, even if others are present. Remember these 9 rules as if you had received them as a gift from the Muses, and begin at last to be a man so long as you live. But you must equally avoid flattering men, and being vexed at them, for both are unsocial, and lead to harm. And let this truth be present to you in the excitement of anger, that to be moved by passion is not manly, but that mildness and gentleness are more manly, just as they are more in conformity with human nature. And he who possesses these qualities possesses strength, nerves, and courage, and not the man who is subject to fits of passion and discontent. For in the same degree in which a man's mind is nearer to freedom from all passion, in the same degree also is it nearer to strength, and as the sense of pain is a characteristic of weakness, so also is anger. For he who yields to pain and he who yields to anger are both wounded and both submit. But if you will, receive also a 10th gift from Apollo, leader of the Muses. And it is this, that to expect bad men not to do wrong is madness. For he who expects this desires an impossibility. But to allow men to behave evilly to each other, and not to expect them to do you any wrong, is irrational and tyrannical. There are 4 principal aberrations of the superior faculty, against which you should be constantly on guard, and when you have detected them, you should wipe them out, saying on each occasion, "This thought is not necessary. This tends to destroy social union. This which you are going to say comes not from your real thoughts, for you should consider it the most absurd of things for a man not to speak his real thoughts. But the fourth is when you reproach yourself for anything, for this is evidence of the diviner part within being overpowered and yielding to the less honorable and perishable part, the body, and to its gross pleasures. Your aerial part and all the fiery parts which are mingled in you, though by nature they have an upward tendency, still in obedience to the disposition of the universe they submit and keep their place in the compound mass. And also the earthy and watery parts in you, whose tendency is downward, are raised up and keep a position which is not theirs by nature. In this manner, when the elemental parts obey the universal, for when they have been fixed in any place, they remain there until the universal sounds the signal for dissolution. Is it not then strange that your intelligent part alone should be disobedient with its own place? And yet no force is imposed on it, but only those things which are in harmony with its nature. Even so, it does not submit, but is carried in the opposite direction. For the movement towards injustice and intemperance, anger, grief, and fear, is nothing else than the act of one who deviates from nature. And when the ruling faculty is discontented, then too it deserts its post, for it is constituted for piety and reverence towards the gods, no less than for justice. For these qualities also are comprehended under the generic term of contentment with the constitution of things, and indeed they are prior to acts of justice. He who has not one and always the same object in life cannot be one and the same all through his life. But what I have said is not enough unless this also is added, what this object ought to be. For as there is not the same opinion about all the things which in some way or other are considered by the majority to be good, but only about some certain things, that is, things which concern the common interest, so also ought we to propose to ourselves an aim which shall be of a social and political kind. For he who directs all his own efforts to this end will make all his acts alike, and thus will always be the same. Think of the country mouse and of the town mouse, and of the alarm and trepidation of the town mouse. Socrates used to call the opinions of the many by the name of lamiae, bugbears to frighten children. The Lacedaemonians, at their public spectacles, used to set seats in the shade for strangers, but themselves sat down anywhere. Socrates excused himself to Perdiccas for not going to him, saying, "It is because I would not perish by the worst of all ends, that is, I would not receive a favor and then be unable to return it." In the writings of the Ephesians there was this precept, constantly to think of some one of the men of former times who practiced virtue. The Pythagoreans bid us in the morning look to the heavens, that we may be reminded of those bodies which continually do the same things, and in the same manner perform their work, and also be reminded of their purity and nudity, for there is no veil over a star. Consider what a man Socrates was when he dressed himself in a skin, after Xantippe had taken his cloak and gone out, and what Socrates said to his friends, who were ashamed of him, and drew back from him when they saw him dressed thus. Neither in writing nor in reading will you be able to lay down rules for others before you shall have first learned to obey the rules yourself. Much more is this so in life. A slave thou art, reason is not for thee. And my heart laughed within. Virtue they will curse with harsh words. To look for the fig in winter is a madman's act. Such is he who looks for his child when the time is past. When a man kisses his child, he should whisper to himself, "Tomorrow perchance you may die." But those are words of bad omen. No word is of bad omen which expresses any work of nature. Or if it is so, it is also a word of bad omen to speak of the ears of corn being reaped. The unripe grape, the ripe bunch, the dried grape, are all changes, not into nothing, but into something which exists not yet. No man can rob us of our free will. Epictetus also said, "A man must discover rules for giving his assent, and in respect to his movements he must be careful that they be made with regard to circumstances consistent with social interests, and have regard to the value of the object. And as to sensual desire, he should keep from it altogether, and as to aversion, he should show it with respect to things not in our power." The dispute, then, he said, is not about any common matter, but about being mad or not. Socrates used to say, "What do you want, souls of rational or irrational men? If souls of rational men, what rational men? Sound or unsound? Sound. Then why do you not seek them? Because we have them. Why then do you fight and quarrel?" 12. All those things to which you wish to attain sooner or later, you can have now if you do not refuse them, if only you will take no notice of the past, and trust the future to Providence, and direct the present in harmony with piety and justice. In harmony with piety, that you may be content with the lot which is assigned to you, for nature designed it for you, and you for it. In harmony with justice, that you may always speak the truth freely, and without disguise, and do the things which are agreeable to law, and according to the worth of each. And let neither another man's wickedness hinder you, nor opinion, nor voice, nor any persuasion of the flesh, for let that which suffers look to itself. If then, whatever the time may be when you shall be near your departure, you shall respect only your ruling faculty, and the divinity within you, neglecting everything else. And if you are afraid, not that you shall some day cease to live, but that you shall never have begun to live according to nature, then you will be a man worthy of the universe which has produced you, and you will cease to be a stranger in your native land, and to wonder at things which happen daily as if they were something unexpected, and to be dependent on this event or that. God sees the ruling principles of all men bared of the material vesture and rind and impurities. With his mental being he touches the intelligence which has flowed and been derived from himself into these bodies. If you accustom yourself to the same habit, you will rid yourself of much trouble, for he who looks not to his poor fleshly shell surely will not trouble himself by looking after raiment, houses, fame, and such externals and show. You are composed of three things: body, life, intelligence. Of these, the first two are yours, inasmuch as it is your duty to take care of them. But the third alone is really yours. Therefore, if you will separate from yourself, that is, from your understanding, whatever others do or say, and whatever you have done or said yourself, and whatever future things trouble you, because they may happen, and whatever in the body which envelops you, or in the breath which is by nature associated with the body, is attached to you independent of your will, and whatever the external circumfluent vortex whirls round, so that the intellectual power, exempt from the things of fate, can live pure and free by itself, doing what is just and accepting what happens and saying the truth. If you will separate, I say, from this ruling faculty the things which are attached to it by the impressions of sense, and the things of time to come and of time that is past, and will make yourself like Empedocles' sphere, all round, and in its joyous rest reposing. And if you strive to live only what is really your life, that is, the present, then you will be able to pass that portion of life which remains for you up to the time of your death, free from perturbations, nobly and obedient to your own deity within. I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. For if a god or a wise teacher should present himself to a man, and bid him to think of nothing, and to design nothing which he would not express as soon as he conceived it, he could not endure it even for a single day. So much more respect have we for what our neighbors think of us than for what we think of ourselves. How can it be that the gods, after having arranged all things well and benevolently for mankind, have overlooked only this, that some men, and very good men, and men who through pious acts and religious observances have had most intimate communion with the divinity, when they have once died, should never exist again, but should be completely extinguished? But if this is so, be assured that if it ought to have been otherwise, the gods would have done it. For if it were just, it would also be possible, and if it were according to nature, nature would have had it so. But because it is not so, if in fact it is not so, be assured that it ought not to have been so. For you see that in this inquiry you are disputing with the deity, and we could not thus dispute with the gods unless they were most excellent and just. But if this is so, they would not have allowed anything in the ordering of the universe to be neglected unjustly and irrationally. Practice even at the things which you despair of accomplishing. For even the left hand, which is ineffectual for all other things, for want of practice, holds the bridle more vigorously than the right hand, for it has been practiced in this. Consider in what condition, both in body and soul, a man should be when he is overtaken by death, and consider the shortness of life, the boundless abyss of time past and future, the feebleness of all matter. Contemplate the formative principles of things, bare of their coverings, the purposes of actions. Consider what pain is, what pleasure is, and death, and fame. Who is to himself the cause of his uneasiness? How no man is hindered by another, that everything is opinion. In the application of your principles, you must be like the pancratiast, not like the gladiator, for the gladiator lets fall the sword which he uses and is killed, but the other always has his hand, and needs to do nothing else than use it. See what things are in themselves, dividing them into matter, form, and purpose. What a power man has to do nothing except what God will approve, and to accept all that God may give him. With respect to that which happens in harmony with nature, we ought to blame neither gods, for they do nothing wrong either voluntarily or involuntarily, nor men, for they do nothing wrong except involuntarily. Consequently, we should blame nobody. How ridiculous and how strange to be surprised at anything which happens in life! Either there is a fatal necessity and invincible order, or a kind of providence, or a confusion without a purpose, and without a director. If, then, there is an invincible necessity, why do you resist? But if there is a providence which allows itself to be propitiated, make yourself worthy of the help of the divinity. But if all is confusion without a governor, Be content that in such a tempest you have in yourself a certain ruling intelligence. And even if the tempest carry you away, let it carry away the poor flesh, the breath, everything else, for the intelligence at least it will not sweep away. Does the light of the lamp shine without losing its radiance until it is extinguished? Shall the truth and justice and temperance which is in you be extinguished? When a man gives the impression of wrongdoing, say to yourself, how do I know that it is a wrongful act? And even if he has done wrong, how do I know that he has not condemned himself, like the mourner tearing his own face? Remember that he who would not have the bad man do wrong is like one who would not have the fig tree bear juice in its figs, and infants to cry, and horses to neigh, and whatever else must of necessity be. For what must a man do who has such a character? If then you are irritable with a man, amend his disposition. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. In everything always observe what the thing is which produces an appearance, and resolve it by dividing it into the causal, the material, the purpose, and the time within which it must end. Perceive at last that you have within you something better and more divine than the things which cause the various effects, and, as it were, pull you around by strings. What is there now in your mind? Is it fear, or suspicion, or desire, or anything of the kind? First, do nothing thoughtlessly or without a purpose. Secondly, see that your acts are directed to a social end. Consider that before long you will be nobody and nowhere, nor will any of the things exist which you now see, nor any of those who are now living. For all things are formed by nature to change and be turned and to perish, in order that other things in continuous succession may exist. Consider that everything is opinion, and opinion is in your power. Disown opinion when you choose, and like a mariner who has doubled the promontory, you will find calm, still waters, and a waveless bay. Any one activity, whatever it may be, when it has ceased at its proper time, suffers no evil because it has ceased, nor he who has done this act does he suffer any evil for this reason, that the act has ceased. In like manner, then, the whole which consists of all the acts, which is our life, if it cease at its proper time, suffers no evil that it has ceased. Nor he who has terminated this series at the proper time, has he been ill dealt with. But the proper time and the limit nature fixes, sometimes, as in old age, the peculiar nature of man, but always the universal nature, by the change of whose parts the whole universe continues ever young and perfect. And everything which is useful to the universal is always good and in season. Therefore the termination of life for every man is no evil, because it is nothing shameful, since it is both independent of the will and not opposed to the general interest. But it is good, since it is seasonable and profitable to the universal. For thus man becomes one with the deity, moved in the same manner with the deity in tendency and intent. These three principles you must have in readiness. Do nothing either inconsiderately or otherwise than as justice herself would act. But with respect to what may happen to you from without, consider that it happens either by chance or according to providence, and you must neither blame chance nor accuse providence. Second, consider what every being is from the seed to the time of its receiving a soul, and from the reception of a soul to the giving back of the same, and of what things every being is compounded, and into what things it is resolved. Third, if you should suddenly be raised up above the earth, and should look down on human things, and observe the variety of them, how great it is, and at the same time also should see at a glance how great is the number of beings who dwell all around in the air and the ether, consider that as often as you should be raised up, you would see the same things, sameness of form and shortness of duration. Are these things any ground for pride? Cast away opinion, you are saved. Who hinders you from casting it away? When you are troubled about anything, you have forgotten this, that all things happen according to the universal nature, and that a man's wrongful act is nothing to you. And further, you have forgotten this, that everything which happens always happens so, and will happen so, and now happens so everywhere. Forgotten this too, how close is the kinship between a man and the whole human race, for it is a community, not of a little blood or seed, but of intelligence. And you have forgotten this too, that every man's intelligence is a god, and is an efflux of the deity, and that nothing is a man's own, but that his child and his body and his very soul came from the deity, that everything is opinion, and lastly, that every man lives the present time only, and loses only this. Constantly bring to your recollection those who have complained greatly about anything, those who have been most conspicuous by the greatest fame, or misfortunes and enmities, or fortunes of any kind. Then think, where are they all now? Smoke and ash, and a tail, and not even a tail. And let there be present to your mind also things of this sort, how Fabius Catulinus lived in the country, and Lucius Lupus in his gardens, and Stertinius at Baiae, and Tiberius at Capri, and Rufus at Velia. And, in short, think of the eager pursuit of anything joined together with pride, and how worthless everything is, after which men strain violently, and how much more philosophical it is for a man in the opportunities presented to him to show himself just, temperate, obedient to the gods, and to do this with all simplicity, for the pride which is proud of its want of pride is the most intolerable of all. To those who ask, where have you seen the gods, and how do you know they exist, that you worship them as you do, I answer, in the first place, they may be seen even with the eyes. In the second place, neither have I seen even my own soul, and yet I honor it. Thus, then, with respect to the gods, from what I constantly experience of their power, from this I comprehend that they exist, and I venerate them. The safety of life is this, to examine everything all through, what it is itself, what is its material, what the causal part, and with all your soul to do justice and to speak the truth. What remains except to enjoy life by joining one good thing to another, so as not to leave even the smallest gap between? There is one light of the sun, though it is distributed over walls, mountains, and other things infinite. There is one common substance, though it is distributed among countless bodies, which have their several qualities. There is one soul, though it is distributed among infinite natures and individuals. There is one intelligent soul, though it seems to be divided. Now, in the things which have been mentioned, all the other parts, such as those which are air and substance, are without sensation, and have no fellowship. And yet even these parts the intelligent principle holds together, and they gravitate towards the same. But intellect, in a peculiar manner, tends to that which is of the same kin, and combines with it, and the feeling for communion is not interrupted. What do you wish, to continue to exist? Well, do you wish to have sensation, movement, growth, and then again to cease to grow, to use speech, to think? What is there of all these things which seems to you worth desiring? But if it is easy to set little value on all these things, turn to that which remains, which is to follow reason and God. But it is inconsistent with honoring reason and God to be troubled because by death a man will be deprived of the other things. How small a part of the boundless and unfathomable time is assigned to every man! In a moment it is swallowed up in the eternal. And how small a part of the whole substance, and how small a part of the universal soul! And on what a small clod of the whole earth you creep! Reflecting on all this, consider nothing to be great, except to act as your nature leads you, and to endure that which the common nature brings. How does the ruling faculty make use of itself? For all lies in this. But everything else, whether it is in the power of your will or not, is only lifeless ashes and smoke. This reflection is most adapted to move us to contempt of death, that even those who think pleasure to be a good and pain an evil still have despised it. The man to whom that only is good which comes in due season, and to whom it is the same thing whether he has done more or fewer acts conformable to right reason, and to whom it makes no difference whether he contemplates the world for a longer or a shorter time, for this man neither is death a terrible thing. Man, you have been a citizen in this great state. What difference does it make to you whether for 5 years or 3? For that which is conformable to the laws is just for all. Where is the hardship, then, if no tyrant, nor yet an unjust judge, sends you away from the state, but nature who brought you into it? The same as if a praetor, who has employed an actor, dismisses him from the stage, but I have not finished the 5 acts, but only 3 of them. Good. But in life the 3 acts are the whole drama. For what shall constitute a complete drama is determined by him who first... The same as if a praetor, who has employed an actor, dismisses him from the stage, but I have not finished the 5 acts, but only 3 of them. Good. But in life the 3 acts are the whole drama. For what shall constitute a complete drama is determined by him who first caused its composition, and now its dissolution. But you are the cause of neither. Depart then serenely, for he who releases you is also serene.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.